You are listening to The Overthinker's Guide to Joy, episode 40. This is the one when I talk about when things don't always go as planned. Let's dive in. This is a podcast for overthinkers, overdoers, and overachievers who are tired of feeling over-anxious and just want to feel better. I'm your host, certified life coach, Jackie Dukrenis. Hey there, and welcome back. So my voice, I think, is a little crackly today. I have been some version of crying and yelling and celebrating and doing all kinds of things. And this is sort of like part 3 to what feels like a never-ending theme of reunions and graduations. But I think this is truly part 3, and this is the end of the series. But so many of you have been asking, like, how was the reunion and how was the graduation and how was the other reunion? And so I thought I would sum it all up in kind of a relatively short episode this week and just tell you all the lessons that I learned from all of the emotions and experiences that I've had over the last couple of weeks. So I recorded last week an episode actually before the anticipation of my youngest daughter's high school graduation. So for those of you who've already heard that episode, you know that I was feeling just a whole host of crazy emotions, from excitement to nostalgia, nervousness, melancholy, pride, joy. It ran the gamut, and it kind of still is going. And so much of that emotion had to do with her being the last of my 3 daughters to graduate high school and leave home, which will happen at the end of the summer. But there was also this extra component of emotion because I was having a family reunion in honor of her graduation, meaning most of my relatives came in for this event. And it had been 10 years since all of us had gathered, since actually my oldest daughter's high school graduation 10 years ago. And that's just because we're spread out kind of all over the country. And so it isn't always convenient for all of us to get together. So it was sort of an amazing anticipation and result in getting us together. So again, as you know, if you've been following this podcast, a few weeks ago, I flew to Los Angeles for my own 40th high school reunion. And I was really nervous because I was concerned about COVID spiking in the big cities, and I was concerned about bringing it back to Hawaii. And when I landed, I think 12 of my 200 high school classmates had tested positive for COVID sometime in that week. So that was pretty significant. And then I was concerned that I was going to get it. And then I was worried that I would give it to my daughter or expose my family or expose my extended family when they came. But thankfully, none of that happened. All good. I stayed healthy and I tested negative. But then, ironically, when my youngest daughter, the one who was about to graduate, went on her senior camping trip with 75 or 80 classmates, 11 of her graduating class tested positive in the middle of the trip. So they were all sent home halfway through the 3-day event. And so again, we were really worried, oh my goodness, she's going to get COVID. She won't be able to go through her graduation ceremonies and all the events. And we have all this family flying in. And again, thankfully, she dodged that bullet and she stayed healthy and she tested negative. And that was great. So then all my family started trickling in from all over the United States, East Coast, West Coast, another island in Hawaii. And in an abundance of caution, because there were so many of us, everyone took a COVID test upon landing, and thankfully everyone was negative. So I thought to myself, oh, finally, we made it. We're all together. Let the celebrations begin. But then on day 2 of the 5-day visit, one of my daughters got a scratchy throat and tested positive for COVID. So that kind of turned everything upside down. We had to pivot. We had to move around the sleeping arrangements, cancel one of the big family dinners. The daughter with COVID didn't get to attend the parties or the graduation. Fortunately, she was able to watch online because yay for technology, and they live streamed it. But she was sad and stressed and sort of isolated from the rest of us, and of course not feeling well. And that was kind of a bummer. And then there was this concern, like, we can't let anybody else get sick. We can't let our graduate get sick, et cetera, et cetera. And so thankfully, everybody was able to attend all the other functions and parties, and graduation was beautiful and It was amazing. And there were tears and it was joyful. And yet we had to be careful, masks and socially distanced and separated. And the thing is, in Hawaii, high school graduations are a really big deal. And way more so than the mainland for some reason. And there is a tradition for friends and family to bring the graduate a lei, which can be made out of anything from traditional, of course, is flowers, but it can be made out of candy. It can be made out of beads. It can even be like a blow up floaty that you would swim with in a pool if you're a little kid. The only rule is it has to be circular. And the idea is that it completes the circle, which is the lei. And the graduate is covered in all of these beautiful leis and colors and materials. And it's just this gorgeous tradition. And all the graduates in the state of Hawaii do this. So when you have one family member at home and others are concerned about the uptick of a massively contagious virus, it does change the carefree nature of the celebration. And as I've said on many of the other episodes, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I was like in total overdrive trying to manage all my relatives and the party planning and my graduate and my sick daughter and a few uber germophobic family members. And I was trying to keep myself well and keep everyone else, in their own individual comfort zone while celebrating this big milestone. So as I waffled between my normal gear of slightly manic and then my new gear of utter exhaustion, I was just reminded, this is life. I can try and plan for everything, but the truth is, and I have to be reminded of this constantly, so I imagine there's a few of you that could use this reminder too. We just can't control it all. We do what we can. Now, in my own effort to try and stay healthy and grounded and present, I kept reminding myself of my own rules to live by. Stay hydrated, eat regularly, try to have protein at every meal, rest when needed, meditate, exercise. And I did an okay job on my list. I would say I got to about 85%. The one where I probably failed the most was I really didn't rest enough. My sister sent me, after the graduation and after the big party, she sent me a text and she said, "Are you resting this afternoon? Or are you going to rest this afternoon?" And I said, "Yes, definitely." And hours went by and she texted me later and she said, "Did you rest?" And I said, "Well, not exactly. I went to play tennis and then I did a couple loads of laundry and then I cleaned the kitchen." And she said, "Well, that sounds like you." But the truth is, it made me feel better. It made me feel better to finally get some exercise, and it made me feel better to organize my house, and it made me feel better to put things in order. And so it was a choice between that and rest, and that won. But everybody's different. Everybody else was taking naps and that's what they needed. And that's great. But in the rare moments that I had that I was by myself, usually driving to pick up for one of the parties, I found myself overcome by emotion. It was like this strange wave of grief and relief and exhaustion and elation and gratitude. And I realized it's life cycle events, births and deaths and graduations and weddings and all the things are bound to stir up a lot of emotion. And I've said this before, the pandemic has created a bizarre extra layer of stress and concern. COVID has disrupted our work lives, our personal lives, and most definitely puts kind of an extra heavy blanket or wet blanket on these big life cycle events. But now all of it is over. My daughter's senior trip, the senior luau, the graduation itself, grad night, the family reunion. Everyone is now back home, safe and sound. And I feel like I can exhale a little bit because summer has begun. My teenage daughter will be in her room for the next week, sleeping and watching Netflix until her summer job starts next week, because that's how she will choose to decompress. For me, I'm back to work, starting with recording this podcast and getting back to my regular schedule of clients. And, for my husband, he was busy working on fixing up things around the house, and he's back to work, and my kids are back to work, and everybody kind of goes back to their lives, and things are emotional and things are joyful and things change. But the collective thing that we had this week was gratitude. And it was really unfortunate that one of my children got sick and couldn't participate in everything. But we had so much gratitude for being able to be together and to be together for the first time in one place in a decade. And that we got to celebrate this milestone. And that, for the bulk of us, everyone stayed healthy and everyone got home safely. And that's really one of those moments where you say, I have to count my blessings. So was it perfect? It was not perfect, but it was joyful. And for those of you who are going through big life events this spring or this summer, I just want to offer you this. If it's joyful, celebrate it and cherish it and try and be present as much as possible, even if it's not perfect. And if it is difficult, if it is a challenging life event, know that whatever you're going through is not permanent. It will pass. And take the help from your family or your friends, whether it's emotional support or physical support, but allow people to help you. Allow people to support you and hold space for you while you're going through a difficult transition. And if it's somewhere in the middle where it's a joyful thing, or maybe it's a difficult thing, or it's a difficult thing, but there's some joyful moments, find the silver linings. And just know that by expressing gratitude for those silver linings, it will help you navigate through the more difficult parts. What I learned was it was still joyful, and it's okay to feel all the feels. And it's okay for it not to be quite as perfect as I had hoped, but it was really, really special. All right, friends, I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to talking to you next time. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Overthinker's Guide to Joy. If you're enjoying these episodes, please subscribe or follow this podcast so you can always be in the know when the next episode drops. If you would like to learn more about working with me as a coach, you can connect with me through my website at jackiedecrenis.com. That's JACKIEDECRINIS.com.